Huff-Pomstra. And sorry, the recording message always throws me off a second. But anyway, welcome. Katie said that there was some interest in sort of talking about the holiday season, that is, I guess, officially upon us, and just some of the effects of COVID and just some of the stress and just challenges I think most of us, if not all of us, have been having, this year. I'm certainly a person that thought, oh, we're going to quarantine for a while and, things are going to change and, a few months things will be kind of back to normal. So I will say I'm definitely one of those people who thought, again, oh, this will be, over quickly, and didn't realize we'd still sort of be in this place, several months later. So, yeah, so I just kind of put together today just some sort of thoughts just about the holidays. I do like for things to be interactive, and so, I'll invite you to, come on camera if you want, unmute, respond to questions. There's a little prompt that I give just as you, sort of feel comfortable doing that. So let me just share my screen here. Yeah, so handling the holidays during COVID, and certainly we're going to talk a little bit about COVID and sort of the impact that it's had, I think, on everyone's life, ranging from, sort of inconveniences and changes in scheduling to really some, I think, some pretty severe impacts. I know people that have lost jobs and really been impacted in very meaningful and hard ways. And so definitely want to acknowledge that this year is going to likely feel very different if it doesn't already, coming off the holiday last week and then coming into the holiday season of, different religions and different groups, sort of recognizing this time as holiday time. But we're also going to kind of talk just in general about, what it's like to kind of handle the holidays. Holidays tend to be, of course, a special time, lots of celebrating, maybe a lot of, different traditions. But it can also be a difficult time, despite COVID. It can just be a difficult time for some folks, considering maybe life circumstances. They may have had experienced loss this year or whatever. So, yeah, we're just going to kind of delve in from there. Let me see here. I always struggle a little bit with my buttons. Okay, so what do you associate with the holidays? And I may ask Katie if you can kind of help me with this. If people are unmuting, when I have my PowerPoint up, I can no longer see the faces. But yeah, just people want to kind of chime in, like, what do you associate with the holidays? What do you look forward to? Or what are sort of the memories and things that you attach to this time?
For me, it is big family gatherings.
Okay. Big family gatherings. Yep, I'm sure that's pretty common for a lot of people. Anyone else?
In the chat, we have food, gathering with family and friends.
Okay. Yep. So a lot of gathering, a lot of being together, I'm hearing. Anyone else? Any other associations you make? And this may not even be an association that you have. It may just be something that you notice or you sort of see this time of year. Anybody else?
Again, in the chat, we have faith, family, and traditions, special memories.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, so it sounds like a pretty common themes there around faith traditions, perhaps celebration, honoring sort of sacred beliefs or times. Sounds like a lot of associating with being with loved ones, being with others. And somebody said something about, this time being meaningful. And so, yeah, I think those are all really common. And certainly things that I think, COVID or no COVID are still important and can still sort of be experienced. So I was thinking sort of about common themes and kind of put this list together, and you all have hit on several of these. I think around the holidays, there's a lot of traditions in your family or in your circle. There may be certain things that you do every year, whether that's an outing together, whether that's maybe a special food. Maybe it could be something tied to kind of religious observance. Also, really big time for gatherings. And this is probably where I think COVID for a lot of us has really had has had its biggest impact, because this idea of, we want to gather with people, we want to be together, we want to we want to greet each other and hug, and we want to have that closeness and that bonding. And so for a lot of us, maybe not everyone, but for a lot of us that are sort of been observing the guidelines that are out there, this has really been impacted. We're not necessarily gathering with people. When we are gathering, we're wearing masks and we're distancing, and we're not necessarily having that sort of physical contact. And then of course, family and friends, being with them, being together, a big part of the holiday season. And no one mentioned this, and that's okay. But I think that if all of us were honest, maybe for ourselves, maybe for people that we know, maybe someone in our family, sometimes there's some other common themes that come up, and it might be along the lines of disappointment. Maybe hoping that something was going to happen that didn't. I think a lot of people this year are probably experiencing a lot of disappointment, again, around the idea of, like, we had hoped that we would be through the woods with the COVID situation, and yet here we are, we're still dealing with it. And so disappointment around maybe travel that was supposed to take place, maybe special special gatherings are going to be planned. I know for some people that planned weddings around this time, that's been impacted. Also, some other themes that unfortunately can sometimes be a part of the holidays is conflict. This can be a time when, yep, we're with people, we're enjoying them, but also sometimes when we're with people from our family or with people that we're not with a lot, sometimes conflict comes up, and that can also be very common and not unusual. Loneliness can also be another theme during this time of the year. I especially think about people who maybe have lost a spouse this year, people who have maybe lost a parent or lost a child. Despite this being sort of a traditionally expected happy time for them, maybe they're experiencing a lot of loneliness. I do know for a lot of our students at UMKC, this has been sort of a theme too, wanting to go home and yet feeling like maybe because of an elderly grandparent or someone that they couldn't actually go home and celebrate. And so sometimes the pain of just knowing sort of it's out there, but I can't participate, can also be really difficult. Unmet expectations. I think this is a big one, despite COVID or anything, just during sort of regular years. Sometimes we can carry a lot of expectations into the holidays. This is what sort of I've imagined my holidays to be. This is sort of how I want it to be. This is the feelings I want to experience. These are the things I want to see happen. And sometimes it doesn't work out that way. Sometimes we sort of have these grand ideas and grand plans, but it doesn't come to fruition. And so that's very common, and no one, I think, is alone when those sort of hopes get dashed. And then, of course, sadness. And sometimes even in the midst of a happy time and holiday time, there can be a lot of the sadness that gets experienced. So again, lots of themes that can come along with the holidays, lots of expectations and feelings that we can kind of have about them. So I don't know if any of you have seen the show Nailed It, but this is sort of a version of that. So here we have a couple different snowmen, right? And so on the left, that's our sort of expectation, right? Again, going back to this idea of how expectations can really shape our holiday experience. We imagine we've got the perfect snowman. We imagine we've got the perfect holidays, and we've got the kids dressed, and everyone's got their matching outfits, and we're taking photos or whatever it might be, right? Unfortunately, though, sometimes, like here in this picture on the right, the reality doesn't always look like that. Sometimes our reality is, well, we got a couple of snowballs rolled together, and it sort of looks like a snowman, but really, it's not quite what we hoped it would be. So I thought this was just kind of a funny illustration of sometimes the way we sort of can picture things, and then the way things sometimes are. And so, if that's you, that's totally fine. I think we've all been in that place of, again, having high hopes, and then sometimes it doesn't always work out the way that we would like for it to. So I like to talk about two different groups, because again, I think sometimes when we talk about holidays and this time of year, there's sort of this idea that everyone loves the holidays, everyone is celebrating, everyone is doing all these wonderful things. And if any of you are on Facebook or Instagram or do some of the social media platforms, There's always sort of that, what we call kind of that Facebook persona, right? Like, oh, this is how, things are sort of supposed to look and they're magical and sometimes it doesn't always look like that. So I think we have a couple groups of people that emerge during this time of year. Those people who love holidays, they live for it, they plan for it, they spend around it, they mark off time, they make all these plans. But there's also another group of people, and those are people that I would say just don't love the holidays. And this isn't their thing. Perhaps they don't have particularly maybe religious beliefs or practices that are important to them. Maybe they just have other reasons why this isn't their time of year. For some people, there has maybe been a lot of pain associated with holidays, maybe pain from the past. Again, it could be things like expectations, or it could be things like a lot of loss that's been associated with this time of year. And so I think it's important to just realize that either one of these is okay. There's nothing wrong with you if you find yourself in sort of the latter camp of, maybe I don't love this time of year, or maybe this year, maybe I've loved it before, but this year I don't necessarily love it. It's been a really difficult year. Again, there are people who have lost jobs. They have had a lot of struggles this year, maybe had health issues or lost somebody to COVID, lots of different things. And that's okay. If you're one of those people who this isn't your thing this year, that's okay too. Ultimately, all of us get to really decide what's meaningful to us. Like we get to decide what's meaningful, how do we want to spend our time. If we have, vacation time coming to us this time of year, what do we want to do with that? So you may be somebody who's like, you know what, Teresa, sometimes I love holidays and sometimes I don't. You might identify with both groups. It's also not unusual for us to hold what we call sort of two opposite emotions at the same time, meaning you can identify with loving the holidays and maybe right now you hate the holidays and maybe this is not something that's, bringing you joy. And that's okay. And sometimes that happens at the same time. And sometimes that might happen, different days you feel different ways. But whatever group you might belong in, holidays can be stressful. And again, recognizing this year has some particular challenges with that. So again, kind of just, kind of polling, the group here, what are some things that you find might make holidays stressful for you? Maybe just in general, or maybe especially this year. Does anybody have any thoughts on that? Is it something they would like to share?
For us, it's been especially stressful trying to figure out gifting, which is something that we used to really enjoy, but now we're kind of limited to what we're able to deliver to family, both near and far, which we wouldn't have expected to do. Usually we are able to see them, open up their gift and react to it or something like that. And so it seems silly, but it is something that is just like layered on, just another layer of stress. And it's almost like we are forcing the gift now. Like oh, we have to make sure to send them something because we're not going to be there in person.
Right. Yeah, no, I appreciate you opening up about that. Yeah, and I don't think that's silly at all. I think there are those traditions again that for different families and different people really mean something, and it sounds like for you all then this year it's recognition of that's meaningful to us, but how do we make it happen? And if we can't make it happen, what does that mean? Will they still know that we care? Will they still know that we're connected? And so I think all that's really, really valid. Yeah. Anybody else? What's making things maybe stressful for you?
There's a few things in the chat. So telling family that we shouldn't gather in big groups. How can I safely gather with family? Not being able to gather with family and friends, and then also gathering and gifting.
So. Right. Yeah, a lot of common themes there. Yeah. And so I recognize that it sounds like for a lot of people, there is this idea of maybe this year, because of this COVID situation, we need to make things different. I don't think it's surprising to any of us that we all may have people in our lives that feel opposite of us. We may feel very strongly that we can't gather. Some of us may feel very strongly that we can gather, right? And so how do you negotiate those things, And so I really think that this is kind of that time of the year where I think a lot of what I call giving people space and grace is really called for. Realizing that somebody can feel opposite of you, somebody can have a different opinion from you and a different practice, and being okay with that. And at the same time, recognizing, for example, if you're someone who's like, I really don't feel like I can gather with my family, outside of my immediate household, is you have to be, kind of getting to that point of being able to say, and that's okay too. My family can feel differently, and I can feel differently, and each one of us can practice giving each other space, giving each other grace in that process. And I think also, I think it's very easy sometimes when we're having conflicts like this, or sort of at odds and people have different opinions, is that we sometimes then kind of attach meaning to that, or we attach some sort of a judgment about that person. Well, if so-and-so wants to gather or doesn't want to gather, that means this about them. And sometimes we can kind of fill in those blanks. So I always encourage people to take that step back and just say, okay, everyone is different. Everyone has different needs. Everyone has a different experience, and being able to sort of resist the tendency to say, and this means something, and this means that they don't care, or this means that they think I don't care, right? Being able to really kind of resist that and just leave some space for just an open interpretation. You know what? It could be that, this year, yeah, gosh, so-and-so, my family's had a really hard time. So for them, yeah, maybe this isn't the year they can give. And that's okay, and just being okay to give each other kind of that space. Okay, so of course, anytime we're talking about stress and those types of things, I wouldn't be a very effective, I think, mental health provider if we didn't sort of look at, so as these things are happening, as we're trying to make these decisions about family, as we're trying to sort of get through the holidays and figure out what that's going to look like, there are things that we can do that are helpful, that I think can help us cope, and there are things we can do that are not so helpful. And so on the helpful side here, again, I put this first because I think it really kind of is the umbrella over everything, is really, as you're going into the season, just kind of managing your expectations for the holidays. What is it that works for me? What is it that works for me and my immediate family? Maybe even acknowledging, yep, in years past, we've, had 100 people, at grandma's house, and we've done the gift exchange, or we've, done the holiday meal, and just being able to say, yeah, and that's not going to happen this year, because of personal limits or because of whatever. Maybe there's been some financial strain or whatever. Yep, I just can't do that. And I think in that, as you are kind of setting those expectations and managing those expectations, also realizing that, again, holding two things true at the same time, it's also okay to be sad about that. It's also okay to grieve that and to say, gosh, we're going to do it again next year, but yeah, this year it's just really hard. It really feels hard, and it really feels sad. And just really, again, giving yourself the grace to experience that, to be okay with that, and to let yourself sort of have those sad feelings. The second point I think can be helpful is just kind of know what influences your view of the holidays. If any of you have cable, there are certain channels that are running holiday movies for Christmas in particular, sort of 24/7. And so, those types of things, social media, movies, other people's experiences, all of that can really influence our view of the holidays. It can also set us up for, I think, sort of disappointment when, our experience doesn't match up, sort of to the norm, and to the thing that everybody else is doing. Just knowing that nobody's living the picture perfect life, and everybody has different experiences and different challenges they're facing. So just kind of be aware of maybe where some of your expectations are coming from, and maybe some of those media representations that might be maybe negatively impacting you. Another thing I think that's healthy and helpful is to get your sleep in, get healthy, eat healthy, maintain those habits, that maybe you're maintaining throughout the year. And remember to get moving and to stay moving, whether that's getting a walk outside, whether that's doing, exercise videos at home, whatever that looks like. But just making sure during this time that you're really paying attention to just those everyday basic, taking care of your health, taking care of your body. Another thing I always encourage is to really make time for yourself. The busyness of this season with so many things going on, just remembering to make time for you, to set aside time, again, for you to feel what you're feeling, set aside time for you You know, if things are not going to be the same this year, that's okay. Set aside time to think about, well, what do I want this time to look like? Limit your alcohol and your caffeine. I think that's pretty typical, making sure that there's not overindulgence on those kinds of things that can really affect your physiology. And the last thing, I think this is particularly true for the COVID season, is really focus on the choices that you do have. Right now, it can feel very much like a lot of our choices have been taken away by the pandemic and by circumstances. But just focus on what choices you do have. What are the things that you can do? How can you connect with other people? What are the ways that you can sort of make that happen, albeit they're going to look different? And then on the not so helpful side, and some of this, of course, is just a flip of the other, is just really avoiding, you know, excessive use of substances. Just really monitoring yourself if you find that maybe that's becoming more of a coping skill than you're comfortable with. Just really being aware of that and monitoring that. Again, overeating can be kind of part of that. Not getting your sleep in. This fourth one I think is really important, and again, no matter what the year is really overspending. And I think this is where we really can see how our expectations and sort of our sort of magical dreams of the season can really kind of come in and be difficult. It can lead us to overspend and to do things beyond our limits because we're trying to somehow capture this very specific particular experience or sort of picture we have of the holidays. And so being aware of maybe the tendency or the temptation to do that, and remembering that there's lots of ways to make meaning during the holidays. It doesn't necessarily have to look like any particular thing. Again, lack of boundaries, making sure you make time for yourself. Again, making sure maybe you have to go a different route this year. Maybe you, again, make a different decision about how you spend the holidays. Being able to really set those boundaries for other people who may not necessarily, you know, sort of agree with that. And then this last couple ones, not staying connected. I think it's really when it's so challenging to try to connect with people, it can be very easy just to say, you know what, it's just not worth it. I'm just not going to mess with it. And yet, despite the limitations that we've had, it's so important to keep staying connected, not ghosting out, not making plans, and then at the last minute, if you don't feel like it, just not showing up. But really kind of challenging yourself to say, yeah, this is hard. Maybe this year, maybe it's different, but you know, I am going to try to stay connected, and I'm going to do some things to be in connection with others. And then couch potato surfing, and that's just again this idea of not being active. It can be very easy right now, especially in the season of winter when we're sort of cooped up inside more, is just to really get into that mode of just kind of binge watching a lot of TV or doing a lot of video game playing. And so again, just kind of keeping an eye on that in yourself and just giving yourself some limits on that to make sure that you're not somehow slipping into a lot of apathy kind of along with that. So that's just some coping kind of stuff just to kind of be aware of. And so this is kind of the other thing, a big point I wanted to make today is just really thinking about making meaningful moments. I always love a good alliteration. But so much about the holidays, it really is about making meaning. And for whatever that looks like for you, whether that's with family and friends, maybe that is with religious traditions or practices. But it's all about, I think, having something meaningful happen. And there's so many ways that this can happen. This kind of goes back to the idea I was talking about, is that sometimes we can sort of have this predetermined idea of like, this is what's going to make the holidays meaningful. This is what has to happen for this to be enjoyable and to make an impact. And actually, the truth is, there's lots of different ways to make meaning, and there's lots of different ways to enjoy something and to have a holiday season that's impactful and joyful. And so these are just some ideas that I had in terms of, you know, perhaps there's been certain traditions in your family that you have done that you can't do this year. Okay, so maybe having some creativity and saying, all right, we can't do X and Y. What would Z look like? And maybe something new that we can try. For example, you know, for some folks, maybe, you know, certain members of the family always made the turkey, or they always made the, you know, particular dishes. And so maybe this is year to say, you know what, we've always said, hey, if we didn't do a traditional meal, we would do X, Y, or Z type of meal. We'd do something totally different. So maybe this is the year, given all the different changes, you say, you know what, this is the year we're going to do that. We're going to do something totally different, totally off the wall. We're going to do American barbecue, for example, or whatever. And so that could be something new that you can try. Gatherings without gifts, maybe within your family, making a decision to say, you know what, so that nobody feels on the spot or nobody feels like they sort of have to spend money they don't have. This year, we're going to make an agreement that we're just going to gather and not have the gift part of it. Other things you can do is volunteering. Again, for people who might be struggling with loneliness or struggling with a lot of changes or being separated from families, what are some ways you can give back? What are some things that you can do in the community to get volunteering and to get connected? Making donations to a charity. Again, if it turns out that certain people, there's not a lot of gifting going on in your family, but you still would like to do something, for the community, maybe this is a year when you start maybe a new practice of donating to a charity. Also, spending time off pursuing your own interests. I think that that's also something that can be very, very meaningful. Again, for folks who maybe are not really connected to the holidays in sort of a meaningful and emotional way, that's okay. There's still time off that can be had. There's still time to sort of pursue and to make sort of meaning of this time, and that's okay that looks different for you. And then the last thing I think that's so important about making meaningful moments during this time of year is just remembering to practice gratitude. There's been quite a bit of research done actually in sort of the social psychology and clinical psychology fields that have looked at gratitude and just the impact it has on just mood and on attitude. And so sometimes we're in the middle of having a lot of loss and a lot of changes. It's very, very human to sort of look at that and to sort of, again, kind of think, oh gosh, it's going to be so different and it's just so sad. And that's always legitimate, and it's okay to pay attention to that and to make room for that. But I think on the other side, also saying, but let me be always mindful of what I am grateful for. What are the things that I can practice gratitude over? What are the things that I still have? What are the things that I can still do? And so kind of that balance to letting yourself feel those difficult emotions, also challenging yourself to make it, and I would say a daily practice of being, grateful. And that may be beginning of the day or end of the day, naming something you're grateful for, maybe within your family, gathering your kids or roommates or whoever it might be and saying, hey, let's start this little, practice this year where we think about, some of the things that we're grateful for and what we actually have. So again, just some ideas and just ways that you can be meaningful this year, that you can make those meaningful moments, even when things might look really, really different. And so the other point I wanted to make here is just really caring for yourself, just making sure you take time this holiday season to care for you in the midst of whatever it's looking like. And so if you're familiar at all with mindfulness is just this practice of paying attention to how you feel, paying attention to your thoughts, paying attention to just kind of the state of where you are in the present moment without any kind of judgment, but just paying attention to where you're at. And so RAIN is the acronym for this little practice, and it's recognizing what's happening in the moment, allowing life to be just as it is, investigating what's happening with you with a gentle, curious attention, and then N is nurturing with loving presence. And so RAIN, again, it's this idea of as you're going through this holiday season, when you find yourself in moments where you're really stressed, or you find yourself in moments where you're sad, or you might feel frustrated or overwhelmed, taking a few minutes just to kind of pause and just say, okay, let me recognize what's happening. Let me just take a step back and just be like, wow, it has been a tough week and there's been a lot happening and I'm really feeling frustrated. Allow yourself to kind of be in that space and to say, because sometimes what happens is when we recognize maybe a negative emotion in ourselves, a lot of times our tendency is to say, nope, that's bad, and kind of push it away. And the more we do that, it can just actually emphasize the negative emotion. So just allowing yourself to say, you know what, it's been a hard week and I'm real frustrated. I don't know what to do about it. And then giving yourself a moment to just say, okay, let me kind of investigate what's going on. Oh, wow, you know what, I had that tough phone call with my sister this week. And so I wonder if maybe that's impacting me. And then being able just to kind of take away from that kind of few moments with yourself of just saying, okay, so what is it I need? Maybe I need to, spend some time thinking about that phone call. Maybe I need to reconnect with her, something like that. But just really giving yourself just some nurturing. If you find yourself having a really stressful week, that nurturing might look like, you know what, I'm going to take 2 hours for myself on Saturday. I'm going to take a bubble bath, or I'm going to, go out and play a round of golf, or whatever it might be. Just giving yourself just that opportunity to just nurture yourself, to pay attention to how you're feeling in the midst of everything that's happening in the world. And then just some ideas for some resources. Anybody can get onto our counseling services website, to the UMKC site. We've got lots of different things listed on there. There's videos, there's some different articles, just different things that you can access. And certainly we would encourage you to do that if you're sort of minded to do that. Certainly there's a lot of therapy supports in the community. As I've been talking today, and you may have already recognized this in yourself, maybe you feel like you are dealing with some particular things that maybe go beyond just sort of the day in, day out sort of stress of the season. And you may find yourself in a position of saying, you know what, maybe I need to really talk with a professional. Maybe it'd be a good chance to do some counseling, go see somebody for a few sessions. And certainly I would encourage you to do that. There's never a bad time to do that. And if you find that you're in that position, that can be a really great way to help you kind of manage through the holidays. There are tons of apps out there for mental health and self-care support. Headspace is one. Sanvello is one that's actually through UMKC. If you happen to be faculty or staff or a student at UMKC in some capacity, that's another one. And then Insight Timer, that's one that I personally use. It has a lot of mindful meditations that are good for stress. They're good for falling asleep at night. They're good for just kind of checking in. Again, the rain exercise we just kind of walk through. So lots of good ways out there that you can kind of support yourself, and you can kind of take care of your mental health during this season. Okay. Yeah, so that's kind of just the gist of what I wanted to say today. I definitely wanted to make time though for some questions and just let people kind of share anything that they wanted to. And so I'm going to go back to the